All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling negotiation.
Sounds good.
We always hear about negotiation in the context of, like, high-stakes business deals, or maybe international diplomacy.
Right.
But you've been telling me it's way more common than that.
Oh, absolutely. Negotiation, it's everywhere. I mean, think about it. Did you haggle over the price of your last car?
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe figure out what to have for dinner with your partner. That's negotiation too.
I guess you're right. I never thought of it that way.
We do it all the time without even realizing it. And, we've got some really interesting research to unpack today. Articles, academic papers, even a glimpse into an MIT class.
So like a crash course in Negotiation 101.
Exactly. We're going to break it all down, help you understand how it works, and maybe even give you some tips to get better at it.
That sounds super helpful.
Let's start with the basics. What exactly is negotiation anyway?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think I have a general idea, but how would you define it, like officially?
At its core, it's really about managing conflicts of interest, finding a solution when people have different needs or goals.
Okay, so far so good.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's got to be more to it than that. Isn't it also about, like, winning and losing, convincing the other person to do what you want?
Well, that's part of it, for sure. There are times when you're going head-to-head with someone, and yeah, only one of you can win that particular round.
Right. Like a game of chess or something.
Exactly. But what makes negotiation so fascinating is that it's not just about logic and strategy, it's also about understanding the psychology involved, how people think, how they make decisions, how they react to different tactics.
So there's a whole psychological game going on beneath the surface.
Absolutely. It's like an iceberg. What you see on the surface is just the tip. There's a whole lot happening underneath.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we even begin to understand that underneath part? Like, how do people's brains actually work during a negotiation?
Well, one of the things we'll be looking at today is this idea of cognitive biases. These are basically mental shortcuts our brains take to make decisions quickly.
Mental shortcuts, huh? Sounds efficient.
It can be. But the thing is, sometimes those shortcuts lead us to make decisions that aren't actually in our best interest.
Oh, so it's like our brain is trying to be helpful, but it accidentally messes things up.
Exactly. And that's where things can get tricky in a negotiation. If you're not aware of these biases, you can easily fall prey to them, or even use them against the other person without even realizing it.
Okay. Starting to feel like I need to take notes here.
Yeah.
So cognitive biases, that's one big thing to be aware of. What else? What other psychological factors come into play?
Well, this is going to sound a little weird, but one of the key insights from the research is that we all have two sides to our brain. They even have this cool analogy.
Hit me with it.
Imagine an elephant. Big, powerful, driven by instinct and emotion.
Okay, got the elephant.
Now imagine a tiny rider sitting on top, trying to control this massive beast.
Okay, I'm picturing it. The rider, that's our logical side, right?
Yeah.
Trying to make rational decisions.
Exactly. But that elephant, that's our emotional side. And it's a lot stronger than we might think.
So even if our logical brain knows what's best, our emotions can sometimes take over and make us do something else entirely.
That's exactly what happens in a lot of negotiations. We get caught up in the heat of the moment, and our emotions cloud our judgment.
Sounds familiar. I definitely made some impulsive decisions I regretted later.
We've all been there. But the good news is, just by understanding this dynamic, the elephant and the rider, we can start to make more conscious choices.
So, like, we can train our elephant to listen to our rider a little better.
Precisely. And that's where all those cool negotiation strategies come in. The tactics and techniques that help us keep our emotions in check and make decisions that are truly in our best interest.
All right, so we've got the psychology side of things. But what about the actual process of negotiation? Like, what are the steps involved? What we actually do when we sit down at the table?
Well, there are different approaches depending on the situation. But one of the most important things to understand is the difference between two main types of negotiation.
Okay, lay it on me. What are these two types?
So remember we were talking about those two types of negotiation?
Yeah, I'm ready to learn more about that.
All right, so the first one is called distributive negotiation. Think of it like dividing up a pie.
Okay, pie. I like where this is going.
Right. So there's only so much pie to go around. Every slice one person gets means less for the other person.
Ah, so it's like a zero-sum game. One winner, one loser.
Kinda, yeah. It's very competitive. You're trying to get as much of that pie for yourself as possible.
Okay, that makes sense. And what's the other type?
The other one is called integrative negotiation. Now, this one is more about collaboration.
Collaboration, huh? Sounds a little more, I don't know, friendly.
Definitely. It's not about dividing a fixed pie. It's more like, baking a bigger pie together.
Okay. So both sides working together to create something new, something bigger than what they could do alone.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. Because in integrative negotiation, you're not just focused on your own needs, you're also trying to understand the other person's needs and find a solution that benefits both of you.
Okay, so like a win-win situation.
Exactly. And you know what's really cool? A lot of times when you approach a negotiation with this mindset, you can unlock possibilities you never even considered before.
So instead of fighting over the crumbs, we're making a whole new pie. I like the sound of that. But okay, let's be real. Not every negotiation can be this warm, fuzzy, kumbaya thing, right?
Of course not. There are definitely times when you need to tough, assertive, even a little bit ruthless.
Right, like in that distributive negotiation style we talked about.
Exactly. But even then, understanding the psychology involved can give you a huge advantage. For example, have you ever heard of something called anchoring?
Anchoring, vaguely. Remind me.
It's this really powerful bias where the first number that's thrown out in a negotiation tends to have a disproportionate influence on the final outcome.
So like if I'm selling a car and I start by asking for a really high price, that sets a high anchor.
Exactly. Even if that number is totally unreasonable, it can still influence the buyer's perception of what the car is worth. They'll start negotiating down from that high anchor rather than thinking about what the car is actually worth.
Wow, that's sneaky. So I guess if you're the buyer, you want to be really careful about letting the seller set that anchor.
Absolutely. You want to try to set your own anchor, or at least challenge theirs right away. Don't just accept their first offer as the starting point.
Okay, so anchoring is one tactic. What are some other things we need to watch out for? What are some other, power moves people use in negotiations?
Well, one that comes up a lot is something called framing. It's all about how you present the information, how you spin the story.
Okay, so like putting a positive spin on things to make your offer sound more appealing.
That's one way to do it, yeah. But you can also use framing to make the other person's options seem less attractive, like highlighting the potential risks of not taking your deal.
Okay, starting to see how this can get pretty manipulative.
It can be. That's why it's so important to be aware of these tactics. Because once you know what to look for, you can start to see through them and not let yourself be swayed by someone else's clever framing.
Makes sense. Knowledge is power, right?
Exactly. Now, another thing that often comes up in negotiations is the issue of concessions.
Concessions, you mean like giving something up to get something else?
That's right. It's a delicate dance because you don't want to give away too much, but you also need to be willing to compromise to reach an agreement.
Yeah, just finding that balance, right?
Right. And one of the key principles here is reciprocity. You want to make sure that any concession you make is met with a concession from the other side.
So it's like, I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Exactly. You don't want to just be giving away value for free. You want to make sure you're getting something in return.
Okay, that seems fair. But how do you know when to make a concession? And how big should it be?
That's a great question. And there's no easy answer. It really depends on the situation. But one general principle is to start with smaller concessions and gradually increase the size as you get closer to a deal.
So like you're signaling that you're getting more serious as the negotiation progresses.
Exactly. And it also shows that you're not just going to cave in right away. You're willing to hold out for something that's truly fair.
Okay, makes sense. So we've talked about anchoring, framing, and concessions. What other pro tips do you have for us? What are some of the ninja moves of negotiation?
All right, well, one thing that's really important is to know your BATNA.
BATNA sounds like a superhero or something.
It kind of is. It stands for your best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Okay, so it's like your backup plan if the negotiation falls through.
Exactly. It's what you'll do if you can't reach a deal with this particular person.
And why is that so important?
Because it gives you power. If you know you have a strong BATNA, you're less likely to get desperate and accept a bad deal. You can walk away knowing you have other options.
So before you even start negotiating, you need to figure out what your best alternative is.
Absolutely. That's crucial. And once you know your BATNA, you also need to figure out your reservation price.
Reservation price, what's that?
That's the absolute lowest you're willing to accept in the negotiation. It's your walkaway point.
Okay, got it.
Oh.
But why wouldn't I just tell the other person my reservation price so they know what I'm willing to accept?
That's the tricky part. You never want to reveal your reservation price Because if you do, the other person has all the power. They know exactly how low they can go.
So it's like a poker game. You got to keep your cards close to your chest.
Exactly. It's all about information. The more information you have, the stronger your position. And the less information you give away, the better.
All right, I'm starting to feel like a master negotiator already. But I have a feeling there's still a lot more to learn.
Oh, definitely. We've only just scratched the surface. And, this whole conversation has got me thinking about something else.
Oh, what's that?
This whole future of negotiation thing. Like, how is technology changing the game? We were just talking about all these negotiation tactics and strategies.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is, and it makes you wonder, where is this all going?
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. Technology is changing everything these days, right?
True.
And negotiation is no exception.
Okay, so like AI negotiators, right? Those
Yeah.
bots we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that IMD article had some pretty crazy examples of AI actually outperforming humans in certain negotiations.
It is kind of freaky to think about, right?
Right.
Robots taking over our jobs, and now they're going to take over our negotiations too.
Well, maybe not entirely, but it definitely raises some interesting questions.
Like, what happens to human negotiators in a world where AI can do it faster, maybe even better?
Right. Is there still a place for us? Or are we all going to be obsolete?
Okay, now I'm getting a little nervous.
Uh-huh.
Tell me there's still hope for us humans.
I think there is, definitely. Because, even those super advanced AI negotiators, they're still missing something.
Oh, and what's that?
That human touch. That ability to connect with another person on an emotional level, to build trust and rapport, to understand those unspoken cues and nuances.
You're saying AI can't do that.
Not yet, anyway, and maybe never. Because those are things that are uniquely human.
Okay, I'm starting to feel a little better now. So, even in a world of super smart robots, those human skills, they'll still be valuable.
More valuable than ever, I think, because those are the things that set us apart.
So it's not just about the logic, the strategy, the tactics. It's also about the heart, the emotion, the human connection.
Exactly. It's about understanding what makes people tick, what motivates them, what their fears and aspirations are.
That reminds me of something we talked about earlier, that idea from the University of Texas about the heart and mind of negotiation.
Right. It's both. You need the logic and the strategy, but you also need the empathy and the intuition.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into negotiation, what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
That's a good question. I think it's this. Negotiation is a skill. And like any skill, it takes practice.
So we can all get better at it.
Absolutely. It's not about being born a smooth talker or a master manipulator. It's about understanding the principles, developing your toolkit, and being prepared to put in the work.
And I guess that means being aware of those cognitive biases.
Yeah.
Knowing when to claim value and when to create value. Understanding the power dynamics at play.
Exactly. And always, always knowing your BATNA.
Right, that best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Your backup plan. Never forget your backup plan.
Never. And one last thought to leave you with. No matter how good you get at the technical side of negotiation, never underestimate the power of genuine human connection.
That's good advice. Because at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to get what we need. And a little empathy can go a long way. Well, this has been an amazing journey into the world of negotiation. Thanks for breaking it all down for us.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. And remember, everyone out there, happy negotiating.
That's all for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep negotiating.